Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum. Dear students, our today's lesson is about the ecological successions, which is from your chapter Man and His Environment. So first of all, we will see that what is the ecological succession. Ecological succession is the observed process of change in the species structure of an ecological community over a period of time. What is ecological succession? Can be defined as that the ecosystems are constantly changing. Ecological succession is the gradual process of change and the replacement of the types of the species in a community. Each new community makes it harder for the previous community to survive. So, first of all, we will see the types of the ecological successions. There are two main types of the ecological successions. This could be the primary succession as well as the secondary succession. The types of the ecological successions are actually on the basis of their origin. So first of all, we will see that what are the primary succession. So primary succession, it is the process of creating life in an area where no life exists earlier. So, an example of an area in which community has never lived before would be the new lava or the rock from a volcano that makes a new island. Here you're watching some of the cold lava which are making a new area for the establishment of the new species of the plants. So here this is an area where never a community was living before. Now, begins in a place without any soil, like the sites of the volcanoes, landslides, and the flooding. So these are the areas where the primary succession actually occurs. Starts with the arrival of the new living things, such as the lichens that do not need any soil to survive. You know that the lichens and the mosses are the lower plants, which are very simple plants, and they do not need the soil to survive. So they are called the pioneer species because they are the foremost for living in these type of the areas where no species was living ever before. Here you're watching a type of the pioneer species which was living in an area which was not occupied by any kind of species in the past. So this is the example of the primary succession. Here you're watching, this is a bare rock where no species was living ever before. So the pioneer species are in the form of the mosses and the lichens, which are very simple plants and do not need the soil and the other complicated substrates for their growth. So the primary successions, when lichens die, they decompose, adding small amounts of the organic matter to the rock to make soil. So it's the beginning of the succession on the bare rock. So the simple plants like the mosses and the ferns can grow on this new soil. So again, the mosses and the ferns, which are very simple plants but complex as compared to the lichens, they can grow on the small amount of the soil. So the simple plants die, adding more organic materials. So the soil layer thickens and the grasses and other plants begin to take over. So these are the other type of the vegetation which can now grow on this bare rock, which was not occupied by any kind of the species in the past, which was first occupied by the lichens, then by the mosses and the ferns, and now by the grasses. So these plants die and they add more nutrients to the soil. Shrubs and trees can survive now on this soil. Here you're watching figure how this bare rock was occupied by now by the shrubs and the trees. So the insects, small birds, and the mammals can now begin to move in. What was the earlier only the bare rock now sports a variety of life. Here you're watching the explanation of the illustration of the primary succession in the form of figure. In the first step, you are watching that only the simple form of the plants are occupied by this type of the area which were in the form of the you can say the new lava or the landslides or other types. So gradually they are becoming changed, and due to the accumulation of the soil particles and the nutrients which can support the new and the complicated form of the lives. And finally this area was occupied by the plant community which are in the form of the shrubs and the height or the long trees. This can also be explained in this figure. This is again the illustration of the primary succession, that the bare rock area or the barren area was occupied now by the large type of the trees finally. This can also be explained in this form, that what kind of vegetation can occur in the different stages of the primary succession. At first, only the few lichens and the lower plants can grow, which can be invaded by the grasses and which can be replaced by the shrub community, then by the pine woods, oak woods, and finally by the maple forest trees. Now we will talk about the other type of the ecological succession, which was on the basis of the origin. This is called the secondary succession. What about the secondary succession? Is the process of restabilization that follows a disturbance in an area where life has formed an ecosystem. Actually, the primary succession was on the area where no species was living in the past, but this secondary succession was actually the restabilization. Restabilization means that area was occupied by some kind of the species, but that was eliminated due to the disturbance in that area. So now the restabilization of the new species is called the secondary succession. So the secondary succession occurs on a surface where an ecosystem has previously existed. So this is the precise definition of the secondary succession. It is the process by which one community replaces another community which has been partially or totally destroyed, might be by the natural process such as the floods, earthquakes, etc. When an existing community has been cleared by any type of the disturbance such as the fire, cyclones, etc., and the soil remains intact, the area begins to return to its natural community. So this type of succession is called the secondary succession. Because the habitats previously supported life, secondary succession begins here. So here you're watching the hierarchy of the events which can occur in the secondary succession. So this is called the circle of the life in the secondary succession. First of all, an area which was occupied by some kind of species can be disturbed, and this disturbance could be the natural or due to the human activities in the form of the hurricanes, cyclones, in the form of the floods or the forest fires, which resulted in the elimination and the formation of the bare area. So now these are occupied by another type of the species which are called the grasses. Shrubs replaces the grasses and the small trees replaces the shrubs, and finally a climax forest is formed. So this type of succession is called the secondary succession. So now we will talk about that why does this ecological succession occurs? Because it is the process of the life for the plants and the other living organisms. Because organisms alter soil structure and the species communities constantly change over a period of time, succession will continue until the environment reaches its final stage called the climax community. So in the previous figures which you have watched, that the climax community which is occupied by the community of the maple trees or the long trees, this was called the climax community. So here you are watching again that how this bare rock has been started by the vegetation which is called the lichens, then the mosses, then the herbs and weeds replaces the mosses due to the addition of the more nutrients and the thickening of the soil layer, and gradually the grasses and the shrubs actually invaded the area, and finally the pines and the other immature oaks are formed there, and finally the climax community will replaces this community which is occupied by the tulip poplars, maples, black walnuts, etc. So the final stage is called the climax community actually. So finally we will see the summary that how the ecological succession takes place. Succession will continue until the environment reaches its final stage called the climax community. So, what is the climax community actually? We will describe you what are the characteristics of the climax community. A climax community is a mature, stable community that is final stage of ecological succession. As you have seen that the area when occupied by the lichens type of the simple vegetation, that was the first stage, and it involves the various intermediate stages and finally reaches to the climax community. This type of community remains the same throughout the time if it is not disturbed. So a stable group of the plants and the animals, which is the end result of the succession process, does not always means only the big trees. As you have seen in the previous figures that the climax community was represented by the large trees, but they are saying that it is not always necessary that these are the big trees. They could be the cacti in the deserts, or it could be the grasses in the fields. So here you're watching the different types of the climax communities. If this is the climax community in the desert, it could be the cactus plants. If this is the climax community of the forest, this could be the different variety of the large trees. And if these are the climax community of some other areas and this from other type of the land forms, this could be the other type of the plant species which could be supported by that kind of the climate, because you know that the plant species are very climate specific. Now the physical factors you are watching here which can determine the nature of the community that develops in an area are the temperature, the amount of the rainfall. So what are the threats to the succession? The grasses that move as a pioneer species are often thought as weeds. The subsequent growth of the shrubs are considered undesirable brush. So, but if without these intermediate stages, the disturbed habitat cannot return to the forest. So you can say that for the establishment of the climax community, the intermediate stages are very necessary, because without the intermediate stages, the soil there cannot be thickened, and they could not added the special type of the nutrients there. Now see students that how the human activities can affect the ecological succession. So clearing the land for the garden and preparing the soil for the planting is a type of the major external event that readily restructure and disrupt a previously stabilized ecosystem. This disturbance may immediately begin a process of ecological succession. So over a long period of time, the climate conditions of an ecosystem is bound to change. So no ecosystem has existed or will remain unchanged over a geological timescale. So students, this was all about the ecological succession and its types on the basis of its origin. In our next lesson, we will discuss the different types of the ecological succession on the basis of the location. So this is all for now. Thank you and Allah Hafiz.